you were looking at the Lionhurst Ballroom on William Street. Music legends Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller performed here. A fire in 1963 destroyed the building. Today, it's an apartment complex. Hi, I'm Dan Ginden, and you are about to experience living history. Today on Living History, we're going to take a look at the darker side of Marlborough's past. We'll tell you about the infamous suicide of a one-time mayor and the brutal slaying of a young woman that took place right here. That's all coming up, but first. Fort Meadow Reservoir is one of Marlborough's many natural landmarks. It's even part of an annual triathlon. But back in 1940, it was the site of one of Marlborough's darkest political stories. Have you seen the movie where the local, well-liked man of power gets caught up in a scandal? Although he proclaims his innocence, there is damning evidence against him. It eats away at him until he becomes desperate. One evening, he cuts open a hole in a nearby lake, jumps in, and ends his life. It's the perfect Hitchcock Hollywood script, except it's not a script. There is no movie. This is what really happened in Marlborough back in 1940.
On the surface, everything seemed great. Like, you know, he was a great mayor, a great person. Everybody loved him, a family man. He was married, had one daughter. As I say, he was on the school committee for a lot of years. Of course, the last 3 years, he was the chairman by virtue of his office as mayor. So, you know, it was a sad set of circumstances that led to his death.
Louis Ingalls was a Marlborough native. Born on July 2, 1885, he spent 2 years at the Bryant and Stratton Business College before going to work in Boston for the Rice and Hutchins Company. He then came home to Marlborough as the superintendent and manager for the Fry Corbin Box Company. He was also very involved in the community, serving on the school board for 16 years. He was involved in the Chamber of Commerce and the Rotary Club. In 1937, Ingalls would run up against a mayoral powerhouse in the incumbent Charles Lyons, who was seeking his 4th straight term. The elections weren't even close. Ingalls would win by one of the largest margins of victory in city history.
A very popular man, well-liked.
In his first year in office, Marlborough's 25th mayor would be tested. In September of 1938, a hurricane would strike Marlborough, disrupting the entire service of the city.
He spent the greater part of his first term dealing with that alone. helping people out and get them, back on their feet and so forth. He helped bring a shoe concern to the city at the time to help with unemployment. And he got things started, although it took 20 years after he got it going, was the Public Works building down on Neal Street. He got the wheels going, started on that. Got the wheels going on what we call Kelleher Field. Back then they called it Ward 6 Field. But he got that going. And so he was really 3 years in office as mayor until, one of the saddest days in Marlboro's history.
That day was December 3rd, 1940. But in order to understand what brought Charles Ingalls to a cold and untimely death, we have to go back before that fateful night at Fort Meadow.
Probably a month before that, when allegations surfaced through the DA's office of some bad going-ons in the administration in Marlboro, and the assistant DA was given the task of investigating the whole thing, and indictments came down against Mayor Ingalls, his city solicitor, who was John Giannetti at the time.
They were charged with selling jobs to two firemen, Paul Lepre and Phileas Chagnon. A third firefighter, Floyd Russell, came forward and said that he had paid $500 for his job. Ingalls and Giannetti entered pleas of not guilty. Lepre and Chagnon testified that one of them gave money to Mayor Ingalls, while the other gave the money to Giannetti to give to Ingalls.
No one knows for sure what happened. So there was a lot of hard evidence against him. And he was claiming that it was a conspiracy, that they were out to get him politically, to get rid of him and so forth. And who's they? I don't know. Supposedly he was good friends with Giannetti, his city solicitor, because usually that's the case. The mayor names their city solicitor, who's their confidant and works right with them. And so supposedly they were good friends, unless they had it going out, who knows.
Marlboro Enterprise writer Joe Glancy was with Mayor Ingalls after he was arraigned. In an article written after the fact, Glancy reports that Ingalls stated that he would never go to trial on the charges against him.
The writer asked him, "Does that mean you're going to plead to the charges?" And he replied, "No, I have done nothing to plead to. I gave the matter no thought at the time, but now I have to, because of the tragic end, I have to come out and tell this story," he says. He said to him, the mayor said, "It's not these charges that hurt me. It's the fact that my faith in mankind is lost. It breaks one's spirit to think that after a long and honorable career, I am ruined by the very persons that I have for years befriended."
The day before Mayor Ingalls was to stand trial for job selling, he went through his daily routine, which included working at the Fry Corbin Box Company.
Back then, mayors all held regular jobs, and the mayor's job was like a part-time job. And he came down to City Hall, finished up, and walked home.
It was then that his daily routine took a drastic turn. There, he wrote his final communication to his wife and daughter.
Dearest wifey and daughter, as much as I love you both, I cannot muster up courage to face the future. I am sleeping in Fort Meadow off Reservoir Street. Please forgive me, and remember, I have never loved anyone else. Hubby and Daddy, 6:30 Tuesday, December 3, 1940.
That night, Ingalls was expected at the school board meeting to carry out his usual duties as presiding officer. He never showed. His wife found the note at 9:30 and called the police. An hour later, police and fire crews found a folded jacket near a hole close to the shoreline at Fort Meadow. After a nearly 8-hour search, Patrolman Amadei Gardner, with the help of firemen and grappling irons, recovered the body of Mayor Louis F. Ingalls.
And he had just cut the hole in the ice and jumped in and committed suicide.
The scandal, and now the death of the mayor, was more than his wife, Marion, and daughter, Norma, could take. Soon after the burial, they would move out of Marlborough for good. The court postponed the trial until after the funeral. City Solicitor John Giannetti was given a 6-month sentence after changing his plea from not guilty to guilty, while Lepre and Chagnon were given suspended sentences. Was Louis Ingalls guilty of the charges of job selling? Did John Giannetti change his plea to guilty in order to negotiate a lesser sentence? Were there really people out to get Mayor Ingalls?
To this day, you hear people talk whose fault it really was and this and that, and I don't think we'll ever know, you know. He took it to his grave, unfortunately.
When Louis Ingalls ended his life back here in Fort Meadow, he became the second mayor in Marlborough's history to die in office, and thankfully, the last. Now it's time for your Living History Pop Quiz question of the day. In 1988, what popular children's toy was banned in Marlborough? Was it A, Silly String, B, Cap Guns, C, Garbage Pail Kids, or D, Bobblehead Dolls? We'll have the answer later in the program.
Mom, can we get some ice cream? Please, Mom, please.
No, we're having dinner soon.
Please.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of children in foster care who will take you just as you are.
That's low and below.
Look, he's blushing.
Seriously. Okay.
This is the historic marker erected by the town of Northborough in 1889. It marks the gravesite of Mary Goodnow, a young woman who met an early and violent end during the Queen Anne's War. War is never pretty. War never has a true happy ending. War is ugly. It brings out savage acts by both parties that seem inconceivable before or after the fact, but for some reason make sense in the moment. It happens today. It happened back in World War I and World War II. And it even happened to a young woman named Mary Goodnow back in 1707. Marlborough is a good-sized city, but back in the 1700s, it was much larger. It encompassed the areas now known as Northborough, Southborough, Westborough, and Hudson. In 1707, only 4 families resided in the part of the city now known as Northborough. Samuel Goodnow's family was one of them, and his home would act as the garrison for the group.
And what a garrison was they took a house, fairly good-sized house, and most of them were back then, and they built like a fort around it on the outside. They cut down logs, trees, you know, and put up like almost like a picket fence sort of type thing around it. So it made it like a fort, and they could run, and they had a gate to get in and everything. They could run inside that. And in some cases, they even had, in the first Indian Wars, they had soldiers assigned to some of the garrisons, like 2, 3, 4 soldiers assigned to the garrison, which was someone's house, basically. And when the soldiers were assigned there, it was up to the homeowner to feed them, bed them down, everything, take care of them.
Queen Anne's War began in 1702 and lasted 11 years. It was the second in a series of French and Indian wars. The battles were over control over the North American continent. French Canadians and Indians were leading attacks against New England settlements in New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
What was happening was the French and the Indians were infiltrating down into Massachusetts, which at the time included Maine and all that. It was a huge land area-wise, and they were making raids on cities and towns and frontier places. There were a lot of families that were affected by the war because they were under constant threat of being. They never knew when the Indians were going to fall upon them and take them by surprise.
Mary Goodnow was born on December 15, 1673. She was born with an affliction, a lameness of the leg that didn't allow her to move about easily or run very well. Perhaps it was this lameness that prevented her from getting married when she turned of age.
That affliction probably had a lot to do with that, because she couldn't, do a lot of work and a lot of stuff like that. Because back then everything was about working the farm and work and so forth and so forth. So she had that affliction from birth, and I think, eventually it killed her because of what happened that particular day.
A party of 24 French-paid Indians headed towards Marlborough with plans to raid the area. It was August 18, 1707, when Daniel Howe and his brother-in-law, Jonathan Wilder, were working in a swampland now under the Milham Reservoir. The Indians attacked and captured them. Meanwhile, Mary Goodnow and Mary Fay were out in a field near the Goodnow home gathering herbs. As the Indians came into sight, the women fled. They were only 500 yards from the stockade fence that surrounded her home. Mary Goodnow, with her lame leg, would fall behind, eventually caught by the Indians. Mary Fay barely made it back to the garrison.
She got inside the garrison and shut the gate and everything. And lucky for her, there was one man there. So she helped that man. She loaded the muskets for him, and he kept firing. And some of the other men were out in fields working the fields, and they heard the gunshots, so they rushed to the garrison.
With reinforcements for the settlers in the garrison closing in, the Indians gave up on their assault and retreated into the woods with Mary. On this hill, Mary met her violent end. She was ferociously scalped and murdered.
They saw that she was lame, and they figured they're never going to be able to drag her all the ways back to Canada. So she was better, or her scalp was better off to them. It's just a terrible thing to say, but I'm sure that's what their thinking was. So they killed her and took her scalp.
Captain Thomas Howe of Marlborough led a group of men after the Indians. When they finally caught up with them the next morning, they were in the northern area of what would become Sterling. A 2-hour fight ensued. It would come to be known as the Indian Fight. When the smoke settled, there were 3 dead on the side of the settlers, including prisoner Jonathan Wilder. 9 Indians lay dead at the camp. It was estimated that a total of 12 were killed, but the retreating survivors were able to drag away the 3 unaccounted-for warriors.
They found 15, 20 bags. They carried bags and that's what they put their scalps in. And they found Mary Goodnow's scalp in that bag, and also Wilder's.
This was the first evidence the group had that pointed to the 34-year-old's demise. The settlers backtracked, going over the Indians' trail until they were back in Marlborough, and found Mary's mangled and mutilated body on this hill, half a mile from her home. It was in such bad shape that they decided to bury her right there. Although Indian attacks would continue throughout Massachusetts, there were no more bloody battles for northern Marlborough, now known today as Northborough.
It affected him greatly because she had siblings. She had a couple brothers and sisters. One of them was married and had kids, so she had nieces and nephews. So, and as I said, she was 34. She had younger and older siblings. So, I'm sure that they affected the family greatly, and of course her parents too. So I'm sure it did affect. They couldn't help it, and I'm sure on the nieces and nephews, I'm sure that they probably liked Mary, because the way she was and everything, and so it was hard on them. I'm sure.
The early 1700s were a tough time, especially for a young woman stricken with a lameness since childhood, living life as best she could, until it was taken away from her in a brutal, frightening, and ugly manner. War is ugly, and so was Mary Goodnow's final day, August 18th, 1707.
And now, did you know?
Hello, my name is Adam Clapper, and I am from Marlborough. Did you know George Washington came to Marlborough twice in his lifetime? Once during his presidency and once before his presidency?
Earlier in the program, we asked you the Living History Pop Quiz question of the day. It was, in 1988, what popular children's toy was banned in Marlborough? Was it A, silly string, B, cap guns, C, garbage pail kids, or D, bobblehead dolls? If you said B, you're wrong. The answer is A, silly string. Silly string was a flexible colored plastic string which was shot from an aerosol can. Residents complained about the string polluting their property and streets, so the substance was banned. If you have any historic stories you'd like to see us cover, you can always email us at livinghistory@wmct-tv.com. We're always listening. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you next time. I'm Dan Ginden, and we are Living History.